The Matchmaking Misadventures in Thai, Drawing Room, Day. The eccentric Mr. Bennet, a middle-aged man, sits comfortably in an armchair reading a book. His wife, Mrs. Bennet, paces nervously across the room. Mrs. Bennet, excitedly. "Mr. Bennet, our neighborhood has a new arrival, a wealthy single man." Mr. Bennet, raising an eyebrow. "Ah, yes, the news spreads like wildfire, my dear." Mrs. Bennet, eagerly. "We must introduce our daughters to him, Mr. Bennet. He must be in want of a wife." Mr. Bennet, chuckling. "It seems you've jumped ahead, my dear. Let's not be too hasty." In tea ballroom. Evening. A grand ball is in full swing. The room is filled with young women and their families. Mr. Bennet and Mrs. Bennet stand near the entrance, eagerly scanning the crowd. Mrs. Bennet, whispering, "There he is, Mr. Bennet, the eligible bachelor." Mr. Bennet, sarcastically, "Indeed, my dear, I can see the swarm of mothers approaching him already. They watch as their daughters, Elizabeth and Jane, engage in conversations with other attendees." Mrs. Bennet, disappointed. "Why aren't our daughters seeking his attention? This won't do." Mr. Bennet, smirking, "Perhaps they are wise enough to let fate take its course, my dear." In tea garden, night. Elizabeth, a witty and independent-minded young woman, walks in the moonlit garden. She bumps into Mr. Darcy, the wealthy newcomer. Elizabeth, teasingly, "Mr. Darcy, I hear you've captured the hearts of every young lady in the room tonight." Mr. Darcy, smiling, "I assure you, Miss Elizabeth, such rumors are greatly exaggerated." Elizabeth, playfully, "Well, I must say, the prospect of being ardently pursued doesn't tempt me in the least." Mr. Darcy, intrigued. "Ah, a breath of fresh air indeed." In ballroom, later. Elizabeth and Mr. Darcy engage in an animated conversation, oblivious to the curious glances around them. Mrs. Bennet, whispering to Mr. Bennet, "Look, Mr. Bennet, our Elizabeth has caught Mr. Darcy's attention." Mr. Bennet, smirking, "Indeed, my dear, it seems she has made an impression without any intervention." As the evening unfolds, Elizabeth and Mr. Darcy continue their delightful conversation, while Mr. and Mrs. Bennet watch with satisfaction. Fade out.